Nathan Daniels had always prided himself on being a perceptive man. As a software engineer, attention to detail was his forte. He spotted bugs in code no one else could, deciphered complex systems, and always kept track of the little things that others overlooked. But when it came to his wife, Jenna, he had been blind to the most obvious detail of all. They had been married for 7 years, and for most of that time, their life had been steady, even idyllic. They lived in a modest but cozy home just outside Chicago, spent weekends exploring the city's vibrant art scene, and hosted game nights with friends. Jenna's career as an event planner kept her busy, but Nathan admired her drive and dedication. She often came home with stories about her team at Clearline events, detailing the highs and lows of working under tight deadlines. But recently, something had shifted. It started subtly, Jenna working later hours than usual, her laughter feeling a little too forced when Nathan asked about her day. She became more protective of her phone, always keeping it face down on the counter, and silencing notifications during dinner. Nathan chalked it up to stress at work. "Big project coming up?" he asked one evening as Jenna sat on the couch, her laptop open on her lap. "Yeah," she replied without looking up. "There's a huge conference next month. Lots of moving parts." He nodded, accepting her answer. But as the weeks went on, her excuses became more frequent and less convincing. Late meetings, emergency client calls, sudden out-of-town trips, all of it began to form a pattern Nathan couldn't ignore. The tipping point came one Friday evening when Jenna claimed she was staying late at the office to finalize details for a weekend event. Nathan decided to surprise her by bringing dinner, a gesture he thought might ease her stress. When he arrived at the Clearline Events office, the building was dark except for a few lights on the second floor. He carried the takeout bags up the stairs, his footsteps echoing in the empty hallway. Inside the office, he saw Jenna sitting at a desk near the window, her head bent as she spoke animatedly to a man Nathan didn't recognize. They were laughing, their heads close together, the kind of intimacy that sent a chill down Nathan's spine. He stood frozen for a moment, watching them. The man reached out and brushed a strand of hair from Jenna's face, a gesture so casual yet so intimate that it made Nathan's stomach churn. "Jenna," he said finally, his voice steady despite the storm of emotions raging inside him. She jerked upright, her eyes widening in surprise and something else, guilt. "Nathan," she said, her voice faltering. "What are you doing here?" "I brought you dinner," he replied, holding up the takeout bags. His gaze shifted to the man, who was now standing awkwardly beside her. "Who's this?" This is Kyle," Jenna said, her voice barely above a whisper. "He's one of my coworkers." Kyle extended a hand, but Nathan ignored it. Instead, he turned back to Jenna. "Coworker, huh? Funny, I didn't realize late-night meetings included brushing hair out of someone's face." Jenna's face flushed, and she opened her mouth to speak, but no words came out. "Save it," Nathan said, his voice cold. He set the bags down on the nearest desk and walked out, leaving Jenna and Kyle behind. The drive home was a blur. Nathan's mind raced with questions he didn't have answers to. How long had this been going on? Was it just emotional, or had it crossed into something physical? The betrayal cut deep, a wound he hadn't even realized was forming. When Jenna arrived home later that night, she found him sitting in the living room, staring at the wedding photo on the mantel. She hesitated in the doorway, her guilt palpable. "Nathan," she began, her voice trembling. "Don't," he said, holding up a hand. "Just tell me the truth. How long has this been going on?" She looked down, her hands twisting nervously. "A few months," she admitted. "But it's not what you think. It's exactly what I think," Nathan interrupted, his voice rising. "You've been lying to me, sneaking around with him while I've been sitting here like an idiot, trusting you." Tears streamed down Jenna's face, but Nathan felt no sympathy. The woman standing before him felt like a stranger. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "I never meant to hurt you." "Sorry doesn't fix this," he said coldly. "And it doesn't change the fact that you've destroyed everything we built." The following days were a haze of anger, heartbreak, and silence. Jenna tried to explain herself, to justify her actions, but Nathan refused to listen. He threw himself into work, hoping the distraction would keep the pain at bay. But one evening, as he was leaving the office, he received an unexpected call. "Mr. Daniels?" the voice on the other end said. "This is Denise Porter, Kyle's boss at Clearline Events. I think we need to talk." Nathan gripped his phone tightly as Denise Porter, Clearline Events regional manager, continued speaking. "I'm sorry to call you out of the blue like this," Denise said, her voice measured yet tinged with urgency. "But I think you should know what's been happening between your wife and one of our employees, Kyle Bennett." Nathan's heart sank further. He leaned against his car, parked in the lot outside his office, the chill of the evening air doing little to numb the emotions swirling inside him. "What exactly are you telling me?" he asked, though he feared he already knew the answer. Denise sighed. "I'm telling you that their behavior has come to our attention, and it's a serious breach of company policy. We have clear rules about relationships between employees, especially when one of them is married. I only learned about this recently, but there are enough reports and evidence to act. I thought it was fair to inform you before things escalate." Nathan's grip on his phone tightened. Reports? Evidence. It was more than just suspicion now. It was fact. "And what are you planning to do?" "Disciplinary action," Denise replied. "For both of them. But I wanted to extend you the courtesy of knowing what's happening. This situation is messy, and it's not one we take lightly." Nathan swallowed hard, unsure of how to respond. "Thank you for letting me know," he said finally. After ending the call, Nathan sat in his car for a long time, staring at the steering wheel. Anger coursed through him, not just at Jenna and Kyle, but at the betrayal that had rippled beyond their marriage, affecting people outside their private world. That evening, Jenna was sitting on the couch when Nathan walked through the door. She looked up at him, her face pale and drawn. "Denise Porter called me," Nathan said, dropping his keys onto the kitchen counter. Jenna froze, her hands trembling. "What did she say?" "She knows about you and Kyle," Nathan replied coldly. "And apparently, the whole office does too." Jenna's face crumpled, and she buried her head in her hands. "I didn't want it to get to this," she said, her voice muffled. "You didn't want it to get to this?" Nathan repeated, his voice rising. "Then maybe you shouldn't have started this affair in the first place." Jenna flinched at his tone, tears streaming down her face. "I didn't mean for it to happen," she said weakly. "It was a mistake." "A mistake?" Nathan snapped. "A mistake is spilling coffee on your shirt. What you did was deliberate. You made choices, Jenna. Choices that hurt me, hurt us." Jenna couldn't meet his gaze. "I know," she whispered. "And I'm so sorry." Nathan shook his head, his jaw clenched. "Sorry doesn't fix this. It doesn't erase what you did or the fact that you lied to me for months." The next day, Nathan received another call, this time from Denise, who provided him with an update. "We've concluded our investigation," she said. "And as of today, both Jenna and Kyle are being terminated. I'm sorry this happened, Mr. Daniels. I know it must be difficult." Nathan closed his eyes, the weight of the news settling heavily on his shoulders. "Thank you for letting me know," he said. The call ended, but Nathan felt no relief. Instead, A new wave of emotions crashed over him: anger, sadness, and the growing realization that his life was unraveling in ways he couldn't control. When Jenna returned home that evening, her face was pale, and her eyes were bloodshot from crying. She set her bag down slowly, her movements hesitant. "I was fired today," she said quietly. "I know." "Nathan, do you think people cheat because of something lacking in the relationship, or is it about personal choices?" "Write in the comments," replied, his tone flat. She sank into a chair, her head in her hands. "I deserve it," she said after a moment. "I ruined everything." Nathan stood across the room, arms crossed. "Why, Jenna? Why him? Why put your job and our marriage at risk for this?" She looked up at him, her eyes filled with regret. "I don't know," she admitted. "I was unhappy, bored, and Kyle, he made me feel wanted, like I was exciting again." Nathan stared at her, his chest tightening. "So this was about excitement? About feeling wanted? What about me, Jenna? I've been here this whole time, loving you, supporting you. Was that not enough?" Her tears came harder now. "You were enough," she said. "I was the problem, not you. I made a terrible mistake, Nathan, and now I'm paying the price for it." He wanted to believe her, wanted to think that her remorse was genuine, but the betrayal ran too deep and the wounds were still raw. Nathan spent the next several days grappling with his emotions. He met with a divorce lawyer, unsure if he was ready to take that step but needing to understand his options. At the same time, Jenna began attending therapy, insisting she wanted to work on herself and repair their marriage. "I'm not asking you to forgive me right away," she said during one of their conversations. "But I want to try to make things right, Nathan. Please let me try." Nathan sighed, his shoulders heavy with the weight of her words. "I don't know if I can, Jenna. I don't know if I even want to." She nodded, tears spilling down her cheeks. "I understand. But I'm not giving up on us." One evening, as Nathan sat alone in the living room, his phone buzzed with a text message. It was from Denise Porter. "Hi, Mr. Daniels. I just wanted to check in and see how you're holding up. If you need someone to talk to, I'm here." Nathan stared at the message for a long time, conflicted. He had appreciated Denise's honesty and professionalism throughout the ordeal, but he wasn't sure if he was ready to open up to anyone about the mess his life had become. Finally, he typed a reply. "Thank you. I'm still trying to figure things out, but I appreciate your support." Her response came quickly. "Take your time. You're stronger than you think." The message gave him a small measure of comfort, a reminder that he wasn't entirely alone in this. The fallout of Jenna's affair was far from over, but Nathan was beginning to see a path forward. Whether that path included Jenna or not was still uncertain. Nathan sat in his car, parked a block away from the home he had shared with Jenna for years. The neighborhood was quiet, the soft glow of streetlights casting long shadows over familiar streets. It had been 2 days since Jenna's termination from Clearline Events, and while they had exchanged words in passing, no meaningful conversation had taken place. He wasn't sure what he was waiting for. Clarity, perhaps, or courage. But as he sat there, gripping the steering wheel and staring into the night, he realized that the answers he sought wouldn't come from sitting idly. They would come from action, from decisions, no matter how painful. Finally, with a deep breath, he started the engine and drove the short distance home. When Nathan entered the house, Jenna was in the kitchen, her hair pulled into a messy bun and her eyes puffy from crying. She looked up as he walked in, her expression a mix of guilt and apprehension. "You're late," she said softly, her voice barely above a whisper. "I needed time to think," Nathan replied, setting his keys on the counter. He leaned against the wall, arms crossed, and studied her. Jenna fidgeted with the hem of her sweater, avoiding his gaze. I don't know what to say anymore, she admitted. Everything I've said so far hasn't been enough. And I don't blame you for hating me. I don't hate you, Jenna, Nathan said, surprising even himself. I'm angry. I'm hurt. But hate. I don't think I have it in me to hate you. Her eyes filled with tears, and she took a hesitant step toward him. Nathan, I'm so sorry. I know that doesn't fix anything, but I need you to know how much I regret what I've done. Regret isn't enough, Nathan said, his tone firm but not unkind. What I need to know is whether you've really thought about why you did this. Not just the surface level excuses about boredom or feeling wanted. Why do you let yourself go down this path? Jenna nodded, her hands trembling. I've been thinking about it a lot. And I think I lost sight of what was important. Our marriage, us. I took it all for granted. I thought I needed something new, something exciting, but all it did was show me how much I stood to lose. Nathan sighed, running a hand through his hair. You're good at saying the right things, Jenna, but words don't mean much to me anymore. I need to see action. What can I do? She asked, desperation lacing her voice. Tell me what to do, and I'll do it. That's the thing, Nathan replied. I don't think I'm the one who should tell you. If you really want to make this right, you need to figure that out for yourself. The next morning, Nathan woke up to the sound of Jenna moving around the house. He found her in the living room, sorting through a stack of papers and notebooks. What are you doing? He asked, leaning against the doorway. She looked up, her expression determined. I've been thinking about what you said last night. About taking action. So I called a therapist. I made an appointment for tomorrow. Nathan raised an eyebrow. Therapist? For me, Jenna clarified. I need to work on myself, Nathan. I can't fix what I broke until I understand why I broke it in the first place. He nodded slowly, impressed despite himself. That's a start, he said. It's not just for you, Jenna added. It's for me, too. I don't want to be the kind of person who does something like this again. To you or to anyone. Her sincerity was evident, but Nathan wasn't ready to let his guard down just yet. Good, he said simply before walking away. While Jenna began therapy, Nathan found himself grappling with his own emotions. He was torn between the love he still felt for her and the betrayal that refused to loosen its grip on his heart. Every time he looked at her, he saw both the woman he had fallen in love with and the stranger who had lied to him for months. His evenings were spent replaying conversations in his mind, analyzing every word, every gesture, searching for some kind of resolution. He avoided his friends, unwilling to answer their well-meaning questions about how he was holding up. One evening, his phone buzzed with a text from Denise Porter. Hi, Nathan. I hope you're doing okay. Just wanted to check in and let you know I'm here if you need to talk. Nathan hesitated before replying. Thanks, Denise. I appreciate it. It's been rough, but I'm trying to figure things out. Her response came quickly. Take it one step at a time. You'll get through this. Her words were simple, but they brought a measure of comfort. Nathan found himself scrolling through their brief text exchanges from the past few days, realizing how much he appreciated her support. Jenna's therapy sessions seemed to bring about small but noticeable changes. She was more introspective, more willing to confront the hard truths about her actions. One evening, she sat down with Nathan and shared what she had learned. My therapist said I need to stop focusing on what I've lost and start focusing on what I can still save, she said. That starts with being honest. Completely honest. Nathan looked at her warily. What does that mean? It means telling you everything, Jenna said. Even the things you don't want to hear. She proceeded to lay it all out, The timeline of her relationship with Kyle, the moments she should have stopped but didn't, the excuses she made to justify her actions. Nathan listened in silence, his jaw clenched and his fists tight at his sides. It was excruciating to hear, but a part of him appreciated her willingness to be transparent. When she finished, she looked at him with tear-filled eyes. "That's the truth," she said. "All of it. And I understand if you can't forgive me, but I needed you to know." Nathan took a deep breath, his chest tight with conflicting emotions. "Thank you for telling me," he said finally. "But forgiveness isn't something I can give you right now." "I know," Jenna said softly. "But I'll keep trying. For as long as it takes." Nathan's journey was far from over. The wounds Jenna had inflicted were still fresh, and the path to healing felt impossibly long. But for the first time in weeks, he felt like they were taking steps, small, painful steps, towards something resembling clarity. Nathan's life had fallen into a routine of sorts, though it was nothing like the life he had shared with Jenna before her betrayal. Days were spent working, keeping himself busy to avoid thinking too much. Evenings were a delicate dance of coexistence with Jenna. Their conversations were brief, polite, and often centered around mundane topics: what to have for dinner, errands that needed running, or updates from her therapy sessions. Despite the tension, Jenna seemed committed to her promise of change. She had stopped trying to push Nathan into forgiving her or rushing the healing process. Instead, she focused on herself, on confronting the choices that had led to this breaking point. One evening, Nathan came home to find her sitting at the dining table, a stack of papers spread out before her. She looked up as he entered, her expression a mix of hope and apprehension. "I've been working on something," she said. Nathan raised an eyebrow, setting his keys on the counter. "What is it?" Jenna hesitated before sliding a sheet of paper across the table toward him. It was a letter, handwritten in her neat, looping script. "I wrote this for you," she said. "You don't have to read it now, or ever if you don't want to. But I needed to put it all down, everything I've been feeling, everything I want to say but can't seem to find the right words for." Nathan stared at the letter for a long moment before picking it up. He didn't read it right away. Instead, he folded it carefully and slid it into his pocket. "Thanks," he said simply. Jenna nodded, a flicker of relief crossing her face. Later that night, as Nathan sat alone in the living room, he unfolded the letter and began to read. "Nathan, I don't know where to begin except to say that I'm sorry. I know I've said those words before. What would you do if you found out your partner was cheating with someone you knew? Write in the comments. But they feel so inadequate compared to the pain I've caused you. I've spent so much time trying to understand why I did what I did, and while I've found pieces of the answer, I know it doesn't excuse my actions. I made choices that were selfish, short-sighted, and cruel. And in doing so, I broke the trust that was the foundation of everything we built together. You deserve better than that. You deserve better than me in that moment. I want you to know that I'm not just doing this for you. I'm doing this for me too. I want to be someone who is worthy of your trust, someone who can look in the mirror and feel proud of the person I see. I know I can't undo what I've done, and I can't erase the hurt I've caused you. But I want to spend every day moving forward trying to be better, even if you decide that our future isn't together. Whatever happens, I'll always love you, Nathan. That's the one thing that hasn't changed. Jenna." Nathan set the letter down, his chest tight. Her words were raw and sincere, and while they didn't erase the pain, they stirred something inside him, a flicker of hope, perhaps, or a faint reminder of the love they had once shared. The following weeks were a slow, arduous process of navigating their new reality. Nathan began to see the changes in Jenna, not just in her words, but in her actions. She continued therapy. sharing insights from her sessions with him when he was willing to listen. She volunteered at a local shelter on weekends, something she had always talked about doing but never followed through on before. More importantly, she stopped making excuses. When Nathan brought up moments from the past, times when he felt she had neglected their relationship or been dismissive of his feelings, she didn't deflect or try to justify her behavior. She listened, acknowledged his pain, and apologized without reservation. One evening, during one of their counseling sessions, Dr. Harper asked Nathan a question that had been lingering in his mind for weeks. "What do you need from Jenna to feel like you can move forward?" Nathan hesitated, glancing at Jenna. Her expression was open, her gaze steady. "I need consistency," he said finally. "I need to know that these changes aren't just temporary, that she's not doing this just to win me back, but because she genuinely wants to be better, for herself and for us." Jenna nodded, her voice quiet but resolute. "I do, and I'll prove it to you, no matter how long it takes." Despite their progress, there were still moments when the weight of Jenna's betrayal felt unbearable. Nathan would find himself replaying the events in his mind, the late nights, the lies, the image of Jenna with Kyle at the office. Those memories were like sharp edges, cutting into the fragile hope they were trying to rebuild. During one such moment, Nathan reached out to Denise Porter. Their conversations had become a source of comfort for him, a safe space where he could process his emotions without fear of judgment. "Do you think I'm a fool for even trying to make this work?" he asked her one evening during a phone call. "No," Denise said firmly. "I think you're brave. Forgiveness isn't about forgetting or pretending that pain didn't happen. It's about choosing to move forward despite it. And that takes strength." Her words resonated with him, offering a perspective he hadn't considered before. One weekend, Jenna suggested they take a short trip out of town, a chance to reconnect away from the distractions of daily life. Nathan was hesitant at first, unsure if he was ready for something that felt so normal. But eventually he agreed. They drove to a small cabin near a lake, a place Jenna had found online. The setting was peaceful, the air crisp and fresh. They spent their days hiking and their evenings sitting by the fire, talking about everything and nothing. It wasn't perfect. There were still moments of awkwardness, still unspoken questions that hung in the air. But for the first time in months, Nathan felt a glimmer of what they had once shared. As they sat by the lake on their last day, Jenna reached for his hand. "I know we're not there yet," she said softly, "but I hope we can be someday." Nathan looked at her, the sunlight reflecting off the water behind her. He saw the woman he had fallen in love with, the woman who had hurt him, and the woman who was trying to make amends. "Maybe," he said quietly, "one day at a time." The morning light filtered through the curtains of their bedroom, casting soft, warm hues across the walls. Nathan lay awake, staring at the ceiling, the weight of months of pain and effort pressing down on him. Beside him, Jenna was still asleep, her breathing steady and calm. It was the first time in months that they had shared a bed. It had been Jenna's idea to invite him back into the bedroom after their trip to the cabin. "No pressure," she had said, her voice tentative. "But if you're ready, I'd like for us to start being closer again." Nathan had agreed, though hesitantly. He wasn't sure what closer meant anymore. They had been living as strangers under the same roof for so long that even the smallest gesture, brushing hands, a quiet smile, felt monumental. As he turned to look at her now, he saw a woman who had changed. Jenna looked older somehow, not in appearance but in presence. The bubbly confidence she had once carried seemed tempered by humility and self-awareness. Nathan didn't know if this was the woman he had fallen in love with, but she was someone he was starting to understand anew. The months following their trip had been a mixture of progress and setbacks. Counseling had become a staple in their weekly routine, and while Nathan often left the sessions feeling emotionally drained, he couldn't deny their impact. During one particularly intense session, Dr. Harper asked Nathan a question he hadn't been ready to confront before. "Do you want to forgive her?" The room had fallen silent, the question hanging in the air. Jenna looked at him, her expression a mixture of hope and fear. "I don't know," Nathan admitted finally. "Part of me does, but part of me doesn't think I'll ever be able to forget." "Forgiveness isn't about forgetting," Dr. Harper said gently. "It's about accepting what happened and choosing to move forward, whether that's together or apart." That session had stayed with Nathan for weeks. He wrestled with the concept of forgiveness, trying to reconcile the love he still felt for Jenna with the anger that hadn't yet fully subsided. Jenna, for her part, had continued to show her commitment. She no longer asked for Nathan's forgiveness directly, focusing instead on building trust through her actions. She shared every detail of her day, no matter how mundane, and never left the house without telling Nathan where she was going and when she'd be back. She had also continued her therapy, often coming home with tear-streaked cheeks and a journal full of notes. One evening, she sat across from Nathan at the dining table, holding the journal in her lap. "Can I share something with you?" she asked. Nathan hesitated before nodding. "Sure." Jenna opened the journal and began to read. It was an entry from one of her sessions, a letter she had written to herself about the affair and its consequences. "Jenna, you let your insecurities and selfishness destroy the trust of the person who loved you most. You searched for excitement because you were too afraid to confront your own unhappiness. And in doing so, you didn't just hurt Nathan, you hurt yourself. But this doesn't have to define you. You can be better. You can rebuild, even if it takes the rest of your life." Her voice broke as she finished reading, tears streaming down her face. "This is who I want to be, Nathan. Someone who doesn't run from her problems or take the people she loves for granted." Nathan didn't respond immediately. He felt the familiar ache of betrayal, but also a flicker of something else, admiration for her willingness to confront her flaws. The turning point came on a cold December evening. Nathan was decorating the Christmas tree, a tradition he and Jenna had started in their first year of marriage. He hadn't expected her to join him, but she appeared in the living room, a box of ornaments in hand. "Do you mind if I help?" she asked. He hesitated before nodding. "Sure." They worked in silence for a while, hanging ornaments and stringing lights. It wasn't until they reached the top of the tree that Jenna spoke. "Nathan," she said softly, holding an ornament in her hand, "I know this doesn't erase what I've done, but I want you to know how much I appreciate you giving us a chance. I don't take it for granted." He looked at her, the weight of her words settling over him. For the first time, he saw not just the woman who had betrayed him, but the woman who had spent months trying to make amends, to rebuild what she had broken. "I know," he said quietly, "and I'm starting to see it." As the new year began, Nathan made a decision. He didn't tell Jenna right away, wanting to sit with his thoughts first. During their next counseling session, he turned to Jenna and said, "I want to forgive you." Her eyes widened, her breath catching. "You do?" "Yes," he said firmly. "But I need you to understand what that means. It doesn't mean I've forgotten, and it doesn't mean everything is okay now. It means I'm choosing to let go of the anger and give us a real chance to move forward." Tears streamed down Jenna's face as she nodded. "I understand. And I promise I won't let you down." Forgiveness didn't mean the road ahead was easy. There were still moments of doubt and pain, but there were also moments of joy and connection. Nathan and Jenna worked to build something new, something stronger, founded on honesty and mutual respect. By their next anniversary, Nathan felt a sense of peace he hadn't thought possible. As they sat together on the back porch, watching the sun set, Jenna reached for his hand. "Thank you," she said simply. "For what?" "For believing in me," she said. "For believing in us." Nathan squeezed her hand, a small smile playing on his lips. "You earned it." And for the first time in what felt like forever, Nathan truly believed that they were going to be okay.